Welcome to the Glue Pod.
Hosted by Aaron Glukov.
Can we check in? You kidding me right now? Get on your phone.
Featuring musicians, hucksters, and some of the shit.
Community of what's going on. You asking me?
Let's start the show. This works.
Can we do this?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Glue Pod, episode 15. It's been a couple years since I'd done this, and I was just telling Rashid I'm super happy to be back, but I wanted to do it with a bang, and I got none other than one of the OGs, Rashid Williams here. How you doing, man?
It's good to be here. I'm doing very well, man.
And you were telling me you just got off the road with Jill Scott?
Yeah, I actually just got back home. We just finished our Europe leg. We've been touring since February, March. So wow. she does this like 3-week on, 3-week off thing. So it's been actually pretty good, pretty cool to have a tour like this.
That's amazing. I know you're in Orlando these days. Where do you guys rehearse?
Well, rehearsals are usually in Nashville.
Okay.
That's usually our central meeting point for everybody to kind of come together. And it's cool, man, because Nashville is such a music town. It's always good when you can rehearse and then like go hear other musicians play so that you could get out of your own head and actually enjoy just being a musician that likes to hear great music too. So Nashville works out really perfectly for that purpose. Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, like those who don't know, and I'm sure a lot of them do, you're one of the guys, man, that's been around a long time playing with the stars, playing with the greats, and John Legend, Jill Scott, Eric Roberson, N.E.R.D,
yeah,
J. Cole, Alicia Keys, and I'm sure the list goes on and on.
Yeah, it's a nice list, man. It's a blessed list. I'll say that. It's a blessing to have those types of names. It also makes me feel very old, though. So,
how old are you now?
I'm 37. I'm
got started early.
20. I've been touring for 20 years, man. I started when I was 17. And fresh out of high school. So this is just what I know how to do best, I guess.
It's amazing. And yeah. I was reading that you started playing drums at 3, which
I don't remember back that far. That's what everybody tells me, though. It's like one of those things where you ask your folks, you say, well, when did I start playing? I say, you were 3. Okay, I'll take your word for it, because I don't know. Like, I don't remember that far. So yeah, that's what they tell me. They tell me when I was 3, I started playing drums.
And by 7, playing in church, playing in the choirs.
Church tends to so it's always said that the greatest musicians come out of church. The reason why is because when you're young, the pressure's already there. There is no, oh, we're going to be nice to you. Like you say, like my earliest memories are getting kicked off. It's like, you're not doing it, get off. And you know what I'm saying? Like my dad was also a drummer. My mom was a drummer too, but my dad stuck with it for a pretty long time, man. So even as a kid in church, they would be looking at my dad like, get him off. He's not doing it. And my dad would just, scoop me off and he'd play. So even then, there's a lot of pressure. It's like you really want to just be the best you can be. So the earliest memory is being pushed to the side. The better side of that is that it teaches you how to have a particular level of awareness within the music that most musicians don't have. And I think that's something that just separates all the guys that come through the church, because when you're in church and everything is a spiritual based thing, you have to be really aware of what's going on around you. If you have a musical director in the church, you got to be really aware of what they're doing, especially when you get into the choir game. Everybody wants to play for the adult choir, not the children's choir. but you got to prove yourself to get to that. So it's a lot of step up to the plate that happens. And as a kid, you just think that that's how it's supposed to go. Like, you don't question anybody. You don't say this is unfair, because then they're going to look at you and say, well, you just won't play. So it's like, you got 10 drummers, man, all in the same church, and everybody wants a shot. Everybody wants to be the guy, right? And you just start to find that eventually you figure out what separates you from the rest, and you start honing in on that. And eventually after that comes the point where they start saying, or for me, it was when people started saying, Rashid, you're on for this one. And I'd be like, okay, good. I'm finally getting to play. And it's because of somebody else's choice, not because I've been begging to play a set of drums this whole time.
Right on. That's it. That's an interesting perspective, because, I couldn't imagine having to deal with that kind of pressure at that young of an age. And yet it makes sense how in those formative years, if you can learn to perform under that microscope, under that pressure, you're set. I mean,
yeah.
And you fast forward to where all the stuff you've done now. It's how does that feel now? Was there ever a point where you had to pinch yourself in your early 20s coming, or whenever you were saying right out of high school, you're in a big situation, a big tour, and you're like, whoa, this is real, like this is happening? Or did it just, it was just like, this is another, I'm prepared for this moment?
Nah, man, it still happens. Like, we were in Paris last weekend. It was the last show for Jill's Europe run. And that night, one of the somebody I went to high school with actually was there at the show. Her and her husband travel, like every year they do a trip to Europe. And it's funny because she had no clue that I was the drummer. We only know about this because of social media, right? Instagram, and you follow people that you've known in the past and all of that. No clue that I was the drummer. But a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, was like, oh my God, you're going to the Jill Scott show. And my first name is Jimmy. That's what I was called in school. Nobody called me Rashid. So it's like, well, Jimmy plays for Jill Scott. It's like, well, Jimmy plays for Jill Scott. So now it's this whole Instagram DM thing going on. It's like, oh my God, I heard you play. And like, even in that moment, it's another pinch yourself moment, because it's like, I remember being in high school telling people, because, everybody's talking about college. Everybody's talking about getting a job. Everybody's talking about doing life after high school. We can't wait till we get out of high school. I was like, I'm going on tour. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm going on tour. Mind you, my high school did not have a music program. So nobody ever seen me play anything. They just hear this guy saying, I'm going on tour. They're like, what do you play? I play drums. I'm going on tour. And they're like, we've never seen you play. I'm like, how would you see me play? But I play. I've been doing it. I do it around. You just never saw it. So even in those moments, it was crazy to see her post with her and her husband, and like, it's on drums at J. Rashid Williams. It's a pinch yourself moment. It's like, I told these people I was going to do this. These people had no clue that I was actually going to actually make it happen. But every time I sit down behind a drum kit in any venue, it's like a reminding moment of like, wow, this is actually what I wanted to do. And I'm still here because, music is fickle. So to still be doing it after all these years is really, I think it's deserving of a, like, is this really happening? Pinch yourself again. Like, I think that moment has to happen every time. And honestly, when that moment stops happening, I'll probably know that it's time for me to hang it up and make space for somebody else to come in who really, really still cherishes it to that degree.
What would you say the key to longevity like you've had is?
I think it's a few things, man. I think one of the biggest things, though, is to know who you are and just stick to that. You know what I mean? I think that with an ever evolving industry, it's really easy to start trying to become something that you're not. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am not. It's a few things that I am not. And I'll tell you what those things are. I am not a trap drummer, as they say. I'm not a jazz drummer. Can I play trap music? Yes. Can I swing? Yes. But that's not my thing, right? I've been really, 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 really coming into myself throughout my whole entire career. And it's like people ask, like, what makes the way you play music different from the next person? And I'm like, well, there's a few things that I learned was me. A lot of people don't know I love rock music, like a lot. So being in R&B and hip hop, I was always playing that music with a bit of a rock aggression to it and a bit of a rock swing to it. Somehow, some way, it started working. At the same rate, now, weirdly enough, I play for a rock band, like I'm in a rock band. And the thing is, I'm playing that music with the precision that I play R&B and hip hop. So people are like, oh my God, the drums sound incredible. And it's like, well, I know who I am. I am a pretty grungy guy, but yet I keep it really clean, really crisp at all times because I want everybody to hear everything that's happening. So I think just settling into like this is who I am is the true first step in longevity. The other side of it is that, we all know gigging is a small percentage based on how well you play the instrument, massive percentage based on your personality, stuff around the gig, because quite honestly, nobody wants to work with a jerk. Nobody wants to work with somebody who's always late. Like there's those things. Nobody wants to work with somebody who doesn't know how to do good business. So while there is a level of I had to learn how to play my instrument really well, and I had to learn what made me me, and I had to learn what approach I was going to take to the music that gives me the longevity on the skill side. That's that other point where I also had to learn how to be on time. I also had to learn how to do good business and just be a good person, how to be a team player, how to make sure that when we're out there, a lot of times, especially on tour, things go wrong every single day. It's no way around that. The people who work the longest are the ones who are constantly like, yo, how can I help? Like, let me just stand here and wait until the problem is fixed, because sometimes that's all you need to do is just stand there, be quiet, don't complain, and let whoever's doing their job do their job. So, longevity is a journey in and of itself, but I think the journey is made a little bit easier when you understand that it's a multifaceted thing. It is not just one thing that'll give you longevity. I also say this and then I'll shut up. I was talking to a friend of mine and like a big brother to me, Brian Fraser Moore, like last week. Like we had a nice long conversation. And I was actually calling him for advice about one thing that I'm dealing with in the drum side, some new things that are happening in a great way. So I needed some advice. I was like, yo, big bro, I'm calling you. Need some advice on how to do this and how to do that and how do I approach this because it's happening. It's great. And it's crazy because the conversation got to longevity. The conversation started becoming because his career is so massive and like he's been in the game for so long. And I asked him this same question. I said, yo, man, how do you still do this at the highest level? Like he's on tour Pink right now. It's like, dude, you've done so much. How is your phone still ringing? And he said the same thing. He was like, yo, first of all, you know how it is. You got to be able to play the gig. It's like, second of all, you got to be the guy that people want to work with. And I was like, wow, man, it's crazy that even him, who's been in this business
forever,
way on double the time I have, for sure. Like he's been in this game for a long time. It's like, wow, man, you use the same exact mental that I'm learning to use every day. I think I'm doing okay. It's like, all right, I think I can actually make this thing go for a while because the guy who's doing it for the time I'm trying to do it just told me, hey, you're on the right track and you're doing the same thing I did. So yeah, man, it's a multifaceted thing, but I think get the skill down, become a good person, know how to do good business. It's 3 great steps to start with.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, take me back to that first tour. And, for the audience and myself, I think, a lot has changed in the touring scene, especially on the pop level and the kind of acts that you play with in terms of not just how you hold on to the gig and the stuff that you're talking about, but like how you actually get it. Like, it's, did you do auditions in the beginning, and is it now more of a thing where people just know the guys in rotation, or was it always an MD who knew the guys coming up?
So a little bit of both. I think every day is an audition to some degree.
Hmm.
But I like first real like we're taking you out of the country, we're taking you on the road was Eric Roberson. And that came through his musical director at the time was a good brother of mine named Kurt Chambers, a guitar player, country singer. He's out on tour with Alicia Keys right now, actually, singing in her crew. So and playing guitar. But at this time, Kurt had saw me play with a gospel artist named Bonita Farmer in Philadelphia. Shout out to Philly. Philly was the start of all things. Even though I grew up in New Jersey, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I was right there near Philly, so everything musically was Philly based. So Kurt Chambers sees me play with Bonita Farmer. He then asked me to play for his college recital. Mind you, in this recital are people like Derek Hodge, Adam Blackstone, because they all grew up in the same town I did, which is even more bizarre. Like they went to high school, graduated high school with my older sisters. So, that whole thing happens. We played the recital. Eric Roberson also came and sang at his recital. So eventually they needed a drummer. At this point, I'm like graduating high school. And Kurt calls me and he's like, yo, that guy that was at my recital, Eric Roberson, he's looking for a drummer to fill in for some dates. And I'm like, yeah, this is not even a thought. Like, sure. So I had already gotten the opportunity to show what I can do in that situation because Kurt saw me play with the gospel artist. And from there, he's like, play at my recital. So then from that, he gets to see how I work because, he still had to give me music to learn. And I still had to go to rehearsals and I still had to show that I was ready for that type of opportunity. And then comes this Eric Roberson thing where it's the same thing repeating itself. It's like, still got to do the rehearsal, still got to learn the music, still got to show that you're actually ready for this. And next thing you know, like I'm overseas playing with Eric Roberson, and it was much different back then. Like I try to tell the younger guys all the time, the way we function with these things is crazy compared to what we had to deal with. My first time out of the country, it was go get a calling card, a burner phone. You got to go to the internet cafe because the internet ain't a thing. Wi-Fi was not a thing. Like it was literally like bare bones of this is how you stay in contact with the world, which made being on time and things like that even more important because nobody's texting your phone. Your phone doesn't work. Like, cell towers were not as advanced as they are now. So touring looked very different back then. And getting into the business, I'm actually glad that was when I got in because I had no distractions. Like, you get to the hotel now, we can scroll through Instagram for hours. We can, just move. Back then, it was like I'm at the hotel, I got my headphones on, I'm listening to the music. There's nothing else to do. Just make sure that you do your job. So I'm actually really glad that I came up in the time where the level of distraction was bare minimum. It was like, yeah, you want to get out and see this new place. But at my age, I was like, I'm not going out in the streets of London or any other country by myself. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go walking around LA by myself. So it was like, no, if the guys are going to go out and get some food, I'll go with them. But until the guys say they're going out the hotel, I'm just going to sit in my room and listen to the music and make sure that I'm ready for the show. So, very different climate back then, but all of that I think played an integral part in where I am right now.
And do you feel like social media has enhanced your ability to achieve the things you want, or do you feel like do you miss it when it was a simpler? Sorry about that. Simpler process and just less distractions, like you're saying, and I don't know, just a different world. I mean, I guess that's a commentary not just on music but in life in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely miss the simpler ways of doing things. Like heavily miss it. I think that this social media thing that we have now, like I look at the drummers and I look at the musicians and everybody just wants to be flashy. It's like you get 30 seconds to a minute per post or something like that. And you got to show somebody all in that time that you're the one, that you got it. And it's like, I think that that mentality takes away the quality. It becomes more about quantity, and quantity will never be most important in music. It's always going to be about quality. It's always going to be about not how much you play. It's actually less is more. And it's all about picking the perfect spot to do whatever it is that you choose to do or what you feel needs to be done. So I think social media like YouTube and that whole world, it gave us a way to connect with people that weren't next to us. But I think it also took away some of the appreciation for the hard work that you had to do to get in the room with those people at one point in life. Like right now, if I want to pick any artist in the world, if I want them to know who I am, I could take a shot in the dark and just DM them and just or at them on a post. And it's like that journey is nothing like it was when it was like, yo, if I want that artist to hear me, I got to get to wherever they are. Meaning, if it's a jam session in Philly, like the Philly used to be the 5 spot where the Roots had this jam every week, once a week. And it was, it was at this place called the Black Lily. And I'm sorry, it was at the 5 spot and the night was called Black Lily. And like if you really wanted to get heard by like the best of the best, you got to get on that jam session. But you can't just post and somebody's going to say, oh, come through. No. You got to get in touch with the right musicians. You got to get into the small jam sessions first. Then you got to prove that like you're good enough for them to say, for me, it was, we got to sneak you in because you're underage. But it was one of those things where, my peers saw enough in me to say, but we got to get you in there. Like you need to, if not play, just see what goes on. And I mean, you talking at that point in life, Music Soul Child, Floetry, Jill Scott, and there was a band called the Jazzy Fat Nasties in Philly. The Roots were the house band. Like you had all this talent and it was like, if you want to be great, you have to go there. Like there's no other option, but you got to work your way to the point where somebody's like, all right, man, I'm gonna pick you up and I'm gonna take you with me. So I think, social media took away some of the special points of like being able to just grow and feel your growth. It made it so that now it's like, oh, all I got to do is just DM them and, play some chops. And it's like, nah, it shouldn't be that simple.
And I feel like, having to get up in a jam session like that in Philly where there's like, I mean, that's showing something real musically that you have to do on the drums versus a post. It's number one, it could just be taken out of context. The thing that there's so many, and I'm not qualifying this, I don't want to seem like I'm hating on anything, but there's so many drummers just playing by themselves on Instagram. It's crazy to me. Like, and I got into music through playing with bands, and that's how you and I met. It's just a different time, and like the way cats made the great records of all time, the drum sound, the music dictated the drum sound, and now it's like, is social media dictating the way we sound? And there's no good or bad. I guess if you're making a living, or if it's a vehicle for whoever to do their thing, like more power to you. But it is, it just makes me think about that angle, like the way, when you're talking about having to put yourself out there in this organic process that has this inherent pressure and has this like inherent need for you to be musical.
Because what you're talking about is musicianship.
Yeah.
And the difference in being an instrumentalist versus a musician. So a lot of great drummers all over Instagram. There are a billion of them. Like you
Right.
can, and I mean, these guys will sit there and play on these shared tracks. And it's like, that is not a gigging situation. Like, there's
Yeah.
no gig that's going to give you that much space because you're not the artist. And if you are the artist, all power to you. You can go out there and do whatever you want. But even Anderson Paak stays in the pocket
Yeah.
because he's keeping it true to the music and the parameters of the music. I think that the Instagram, YouTube, social media generation world is one in which, like I said, it's just how flashy can I be to get somebody to like my post?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, and I've seen it happen. Jesus Christ, we both know people who, if we really look at the level of acclaimed attention they get, that have never played a gig. Like, there are literally people who you and I both know and who they got products out with their name on it, and they got hundreds of thousands of people follow them on social media, and they've never played a gig, never been on tour.
Wow.
Never. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, it starts to make you really wonder how much stock are we putting into the correct things or the incorrect things, and then we wonder why music isn't what it used to be. It's because of the fact that people aren't keeping it. That organic process is gone. You know what I'm saying? Now you're lucky when you get a, Sput C Ride and Ghost Note. You're lucky when you get a Snarky Puppy.
Yeah.
You're lucky to have these types of situations. However, those situations are few and far between. We can all look at Mono Neon and talk about how incredible he is. We can all look at Mike Mitchell and talk about how incredible he is. You can go to the Robert Glassers, Chris Daves, Derek Hodges, Adam Blackstones, and you got all these situations that have these organic musical things that are just naturally happening. However, that's starting to become almost underground, and they're still winning their awards and they still are, there's notoriety there, but that's not an arena thing. You know what I'm saying? And what is happening is folks forget that the only way that becomes what it actually deserves to be is that we as a collective have to push that energy forward so that in turn we all start to kind of progress in the world of authentic, true, musicianship. But that's going to take time. That's going to take time, man. These young guys are still thinking that all they got to do is play a bunch of chops for, a minute on a post and they're going to get a gig. And it's like, nah, it really doesn't work like that. And if you do get a gig, I've seen it happen a million times where somebody 10 years younger than me gets the call. And that's great. I'm happy. I'm like, thank God. Push me out the way. Take all the way. But then my phone still rings a week later because they're like, yo, the kid can play a bunch of chops, but the kid ain't got no fill.
Yeah.
Or the kid can play chops, but the kid didn't learn the music. Or, it's so many different things. And it just so happens that because I did grow up in a shed community, I can play chops and I can also play music, because I was taught that the music is what keeps the gig. And whenever the boss or whoever you're working for says, hey, give me a little extra right there, just have it in your back pocket for when you need it. But I think it's gonna go back. It's gonna turn around, but it's just gonna take some time.
It's funny because I was just thinking about, as we're talking, one of my current heroes is Yusuf Days, and it's like he's married unique drum sound with musicality, and he's integrated into actual music, actual records with people that sound cool to listen to, that have emotion in them. It's not just about him being dope on the drums and having a dope drum sound independently of music. And then on top of that, the cherry on the cake, and which is so hard, is that he's had massive success. And Europe is way ahead of us with this stuff. I mean, he got put on, him and Kamal Williams, and now he's doing his own thing. But, I was in San Francisco a little while back, and I went and saw a show of his live, and I think it was this place called the Independent. It had to be like a 500 to 800 person space, sold out to the brim. It's a Yusuf Days experience. I'm like, the drums are in the center. I'm like, this, I've never seen anything like this. Like, I mean, people were packed in. He was like, he pulled like a Lauryn Hill and showed up an hour late. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, this guy's a drummer. You know what I mean? He's not a celebrity. He's not a pop star. And I was just like, this is amazing that he's, that this, like you said, like people can slip through the cracks, and it gives you hope. It makes you want to support people like that, because you're like, this, bringing musicianship to the drums, and just bringing live music to people, like, because I felt like there were probably people in the audience that aren't musicians, that aren't drum nerds, like, because you can't rely on that. Although, and to your point, it's like there are guys whose whole bag is playing drum clinics and are in that thing, and that's dope. It's just, I personally, I don't have, not only could I not do it and don't have the skills that anybody would want to see me at a drum clinic, but I just, I would, but I would never, I mean, it's just like, I keep thinking, and me and my buddies, like, I'm in my early 30s, now I'm 32, and I'm just trying to figure out how can I get 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds into the audience? How can I keep finding bands with young people and keep this, because there is a hunger for like organic shit. And like, what can we do musically to reach them? I always, Jason and I with Twin, we just played in Gainesville. We linked up with this band Dionysus that's been playing around, Central Florida guys from Gainesville, some young cats, and like, I just love their energy, man, because they get young people out, and they're playing like it's quartet, keys, bass, drums, and sax, and they're playing instrumental, like funk fusion type stuff in their own, like in a dance way, like they have their own thing. And there's just all these people coming out, loving it, enjoying it. I'm just like, this is where it's at. Like,
what you just said is how it works, though. It's the network. It's creating that network of musicians. A lot like we met. We met at a venue that you were playing at, and it was like, yo, here's something. I feel like, was it Justin Tyson played that night too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to play before Justin Tyson 3 times.
Yeah. Oh, listen, it was amazing. I was just standing there like, this was beautiful, because I was there helping with the production side of things.
Yeah.
I wasn't even there to play. But the thing is, that network and being able to step into those types of spaces is how we push it forward. You know what I mean? What you just said, you had a gig, you met some younger guys that were doing some dope stuff. That is how it works. That is how you, in turn, end up creating this snowball effect. Because now, I mean, look at where we are, right? Like, I'm 37, you're 32, those guys are 22.
Right.
That covers 15 years, right? of being able to shape and mold how somebody sees the business and what we have to protect. So that 15-year gap used to not be like that, because keep in mind, when I was 22 and you had the guys ahead of me, Lil Jon, Brian Fraser Moore, those guys, those were the guys, those were like the big homies, right? But the gap wasn't 15 years. The gap was like 10, maybe 11 years. But so the ahead gap was shorter. And then at my 22, you had the 16, 17, 18-year-olds were already veering off into some other thing.
Yeah.
So now beneath me, or like under my age bracket, you only got 4 to 6 years of folks, where under my age bracket, you just gave me a 15-year window. So it is getting better. You know what I mean? That it is changing, because that means that I can trust that, because I know you know what you're doing musically, and Twin is a dope band. You know what I'm saying? That whole duo thing is incredible to me. So it's like, me at 37 looks at the 32-year-old and says, okay, that's your angle. I'm going to do my part up here. You're gonna do your part at 32, and that generation and the couple years ahead of you, couple years behind you, got to take care of everybody. But then 22-year-olds in the crowd are now seeing what you're displaying and able to say, wait a minute, okay, we're here to do this thing too. And then 22-year-olds are gonna now look for a couple years ahead for inspiration, a couple years behind to make sure that they're paving the way.
Right
So
on.
eventually it turns into us getting the 17, 18-year-olds back into real music. You know what I'm saying? So look at that, right? When I was 22, 17, 18-year-olds didn't care about real music. Well, whatever 22-year-olds you met, the hope is that those 17, 18-year-olds care about music because of what they see
Right on.
in 22-year-olds. So I think it's all about paying it forward, man. We all have to do our individual part to cover as much of our generation and the generation that follows us, as much as we possibly can.
Facts. Well, I think that's a good segue because you also have your own original stuff going on in O-Town, and is it Made in Seal or Made in Soul?
Made in Soul.
Made in Soul. Silent E, for anybody who wants to look it up.
Yeah, because I mean it's literally referencing Seoul, South Korea. So yeah.
And it's cinematic pop.
Yeah, it's like I would say that cinematic pop. And it's funny because right now I am putting all of my energy into projects that I'm working on. I still get to pay the bills and it's great. I love touring with the major acts. But Made in Soul so I have LFJ Orchestra, which is actually on hiatus right now, just because I've been on the road. I have Made in Soul, which we just released our first album about a month or two ago, month and a half or so ago. And then I also have like Felicity, that's the rock band. They're punk emo rock. And I played their whole album and joined that band fully. So we're actually releasing our second single. This isn't going to come. By the time this comes out, we'll be past the second single. But the second single comes out tomorrow in present time. By the time people see this, it'll be already out. But yeah, it's interesting because, all this gigging world, that's cool. I think it had its place. Like when I was 22, it had it was a teacher. It was a vehicle. It drove me to some new places. At 37, it's something that I'm only hoping that I'm keeping prepped for the next guy coming through the door that's looking for these opportunities. Because I've already kind of started putting my brain more into the projects that I'm directly affected by, directly connected to, directly working on, because they're things that have not only my name on it, but it has my creative points, my creation on it as well. So yeah, man, I'm full blown, full throttle, doing too much.
Yeah, no, and that's, and I dig that about you because when I follow you, I'm like, I totally identify with that. Like you put yourself in all these multiple creative ventures, and of course you're still touring like crazy, which is I don't know how you juggle it all. It's insane because that's like a real touring schedule. And at the same time, like you're your own producer. You're super ahead on the technology game too. I know, like we've talked a little bit back in Orlando about like even just in the live capacity with triggers and samples and live sampling. For drummers now, like if they're looking to get into that and I don't know, find a way to use that creatively or just on a gig, what would your suggestion be for them, and how do you even start?
It starts with some form of vision. I encourage each and every musician that I speak to, I always say the same thing. You got to kind of have an idea where you want to land at. I think that for me, with some, like you said, we spoke about some of that stuff. Some of my trigger game was more about how do I create a bunch of sounds using the drums and using a few electronics that give me the track sound, give me the electronic sound without having to run backing tracks. And that was the goal. The goal was, that's how it started. The goal was, let's just figure out how to not need backing tracks, but still get all the electronic function that we want.
That's tough.
Yeah, it's super tough. It's very, very tough. but you just start throwing some stuff at the wall and you see what sticks.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I went overboard first, like I went way over the top. And at one point, I had like guitar pedals hooked up to kick triggers and all types of foolishness. What I later found is that I didn't need all that. I could do exactly what I wanted to do without that much technology. You know, I was able just to rely on some of the products that are already on the market for drummers. Of course, all Roland products. I believe in Roland. So I
Same
was
here.
able to figure that stuff out. Yeah, like, you know, and then once you come up with that kind of your niche, you know, you find out what works, then you start being able to say, okay, now let's see how far we can maximize this and how much we can broaden the scale of what we're doing. And I think that right now I actually have a really great balance of all the things necessary to express all areas, right? So, you know, I have Felicity, which is straight up punk rock, emo rock. No electronics necessary. We just get up there and it's all acoustic drums at its best. Um, I then have Maiden Soul, which I mean, I played everything on that record from drums to candles to aerosol spray cans. Like, I mean, we experimented on every level we possibly could, putting that record together. And that was years ago. We were doing that back in 2011. You know, most of the record was recorded in 2011.
No
Um,
way.
so yeah, it was, you know, we only brought that music back and remixed it to release it. So you have that aspect, right? Like, you know, super experimental, but yet still very clear vision. And then the LFJ orchestra stuff, which is like my personal, you know, fun town, my personal playground. That is where all the experiments get done. It's like anything my brain can think of, here's my platform to just let my mind run wild.
Yeah.
And you know, that gives me the ultimate balance because I have everything from go crazy to play the parts, but you played the parts maybe on some weird things. And then all the way up to the just straight up and down in your face, just be a drummer, you know. So that balance has been really helpful. I think that the younger generation, his minds are already far advanced than
Hmm.
mine was when I was, you know, much younger. I think that the things that are necessary in music are far more elaborate than they were when I was, you know, in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So I think it's naturally going to have its own progression. But yeah, it's crazy to think. It's crazy to think about just how far we've come. You know.
It really is, and it's, you know, it's one thing to investigate and have the vision, but then you got to learn the coordination, the execution, because once you start adding the triggers and the SPDS, and you've got the different times that it comes in, when to hit it, when to not. I mean, it can get really, it can get crazy. And then, you know, it's like anything. It's like another limb. You get comfortable with it. I always find that the other, you know, sort of underestimated problem to solve is then you've got the sound at the given venue. And if you're doing it with an original project, it's not like you're like on the road with the top sound team that's running the in-ears, and it's like, all right, so how are you going to corkscrew, you know, you're going to run your SPDS through a reverb, you know, pedal and run it out, and then is it going to, you know, is the sibilance going to be super harsh, and are you like, you know, and that's just on the simple level. I remember when you were telling me some of the stuff you're doing, I was like, oh man, I got there. That's a lot.
It gets very intense. It gets very, very, very intense. I mean, even look at Jill Scott's gig. There's no backing tracks there. So between me and the percussionist Dom Thomas, we are the track, like completely. Like there is no Pro Tools. There's no playback of any sort. So anything people hear when they're like, "There's a track running," no, 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 no. That's us
Whew.
playing all the parts. And you know, a lot of drummers are doing now, which something that, you know, me and my friends, me and my peers have been doing for years, You got your main kick pedal with the kick drum in front of it, then you got the electronic pedal right next to it. And literally somebody asked me, just like, no, but there was a sub going while you were playing, like a sub kick. I was like, yeah, that was me. Like I'm literally just moving my foot back and forth. And then sometimes playing my toe on my main foot pedal on the electric pedal and dropping my foot at the same time so that they can be simultaneously attacked. Literally, it gets that surgical.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, now let's think of another way. And then another way, and then another way. And how far can we push our limb limits? Like, okay, cool. I need to play the beat, but I also need to play a clap, but I also need to play a snap on this one part. Percussion is going to carry percussion, but there's a part where he can't cover the cowbell part. Cool. Give me a cowbell. I'll cover that part. Like, it's literally surgical of how it works. And then there's times where, like, especially on Jill's gig, where, our percussionist Dom, he's playing some simple stuff that I just don't have the hands to do. There's parts where I'm playing claps, there's parts where he's playing claps electronically. And it's just literally just getting that little thing, that synergy, like, okay, you do that right there, I'll do this right here. But it really all becomes octopus work.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how many places can my hands be? And if you hear it, it sounds so simple, right? Like it's R&B. It sounds so groovy and so in the pocket. But when you start to really dissect some of what you're hearing, it's like, wait a minute. I'm hearing a snap, a clap, a sub kick. Plus I'm hearing full drum kit, full percussion. These people only have 2 hands and 2 feet. How are they doing this? And
it's dope.
It takes some time.
Yeah. And do you work it out in your practice room on your own before you take it on the road? I mean, or to rehearsal, or have you been doing this long enough that you're like, I'll figure it out at rehearsal. We got time.
It's a little bit of both. I'm more of a mental guy at home. Like even now, it's funny because I was like, I can do this sitting upstairs in my little studio space. And I was like, no, because like now I don't work out of that room as much as I used to. Like I'm looking at my kitchen is right here to me, right? So my island is covered with speakers, a controller, and like I work in the space of like my living room, my dining room, my kitchen. I work in this space. And it's funny, I was like, yeah, no, like at home, I don't think people realize how much of a home life I'm determined to have.
Yeah.
So, when I get new music or when I get stuff that I got to work parts out, it's a lot of mental prep. If I need to program like my TM6 Pro or something like that, or my SPDSX, I'll sit at the dining room table and just work through that stuff. But I don't do as much sitting down and playing at home. It's a lot of mental and a lot of note taking. And then when I'll get the plan together. And then when I get to rehearsal, it's just a matter of executing the plan. Now, to anybody young out there, I do not recommend doing it that way. I recommend sitting in your space with drums, with electronics, with all the bells and whistles, make it work. Learn how to do what you do. For me, because I already did that years ago, now I'm able to say, well, I know what everything is capable of, including my own body. I know that if I'm going to use a TM6 Pro, that's going to give me 6 inputs, 6 outputs. That's what I got to work with, or I need to double up on that. I know that if I'm using the SPDSX, which I haven't even gotten my hands on the SPDSX Pro.
I was actually going to ask you that. I was going to see, have you up?
Not even there yet. I'm still on the older one, right? So, that one is easier for me to navigate through because I've had so much time with it. Mm-hmm. I know what it's capable of. I know where everything is in it. And I'm able to get music from people and say, okay, cool. So this will work best with a TM6 Pro. Like I'm going to need more than just 2 or 3 trigger outputs. I'm going to need 6 trigger outputs. And because I'm going to use trigger outputs and this machine has, trigger inputs, and this machine also has trigger outputs, I can actually send front of house and monitors separate channels for each thing. Or like what we do with Jill and John Legend, we just route everything to be a kick, a E snare, and then an auxiliary. So there's always 3 outs. Even though there's 6 inputs, we just route them. So like knowing all these little intricate details about this machinery makes it so that when I'm at home, all I gotta really do is just think through it. I'll say, okay, cool. I got a kick, I got a snare, I got a clap, maybe a snap. So I can run the snaps, the snares, and the claps all from one, route those all to one output. I could run all my low end stuff from another output. Oh, there's this weird sample that I got to trigger. Okay, cool. I'll throw a third input in there just for that, so that sound in front of house can edit that separately. Literally the process that goes through my mind. That takes all of a few minutes. And then from there, it's just a matter of making sure that I have all my samples lined up in my computer so that when it's time to dump everything, I can do so.
Yeah.
Make sure that I have a couple of thumb drives that are formatted to each machine to make sure I have what I need for that. And I'm the guy that like shows up in rehearsal the first day, and I'm like, if I'm the musical director, then I'll give everybody time for programming. But if I'm not, I always let the musical director know, like, yo, I just need like 1 hour just to run through everything, assign everything, make it all make sense.
Yeah.
And I'll be ready to play.
I've got to add this to your list of ways to have longevity in this game, because I'm
Gotta
sure.
have a system.
Yeah, and just being able to be that fluid with the electronics for these pop gigs must be a huge advantage.
Oh man, it's you don't know true adrenaline rush on stage, and you realize that something got missed somethinged, and your claps are not where they're supposed to be. So you're programming while you're still playing the show. That is when you start to really catch on to like, okay, I think I got this thing down to a science. Like we were playing a show recently, and then we didn't have our gear, we had a backline. And for whatever reason, when I loaded my TM6 Pro stuff, my thresholds and gating and all of that stuff wasn't on the sound. So I was getting a lot of like mistriggering, and like I would hit the kick drum and hear a clap sound.
Oh God.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
I'm literally, my drum tech, it was like, he's looking at me. I'm like, in my talk back, I'm like, bro, I got it. I'll fix it. Rather than you trying to squeeze up here on the riser while we're in the middle of the show.
Right.
Literally at the point of like programming new thresholds and sensitivities while I'm still playing the show. And I was like, oh yeah, it's good to have those little reminders at times, and I still know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because that's when you start to find that it pays to be comfortable with your gear. It pays to know the music enough to know when you have these moments. And it ultimately pays to be able to say, okay, I can function at a high level in any given circumstance. And, that just takes time and experience, and takes things going wrong. It takes you breaking the kick drum pedal a few times before you say, maybe it's smart to have a random electronic kick that sounds like an acoustic kick just ready to go if this ever happens. It's one of those things you just start to learn how to make it make sense.
Yeah. Well, man, you're one of the industry's best. You've been in the game a long, long time, and really appreciate you coming on here, man. This is dope.
No, I appreciate you having me.
And if you want to give the listeners, your band's Instagrams, your Instagram, where to follow you, where to stay up with you.
So my Instagram is at Rashid Williams, which is the best way to find me. My Felicity band is We Are Felicity, at We Are Felicity, and that's on all platforms. Maiden Soul is at Maiden Soul Music. Soul spelled with the E, like Seoul, South Korea. And not made in, it's like the maiden, like the female.
Like Maiden Voyage.
Yeah, like Maiden Voyage. There you go. So Maiden Soul Music is where you find that. And then for LFJ Orchestra, it's LFJ Orchestra, at LFJ Orchestra. So, we have all these little things that are going on. It's like, if you find one, you'll find all of them. That I can tell you. Find mine at Rashid Williams, you'll find all the others, all listed in my profile, and I post about all the projects as often as I can. So yeah, that's the best way it'd be. I'm looking forward to folks starting to give the reviews on how I sound playing rock music. That's like my new
Nice.
mental point of like looking forward to. I'm like, this is something that folks have never heard me do. The Maiden Soul music is a lot more chill, laid back, cinematic. So, you know, that stuff is understandably always going to be like, okay, he can do that. Rock is the one I'm like, I want to know what everybody thinks. You know, and if I suck, everybody can tell me I suck. I'm totally fine with that.
Are you guys going to be touring nationally anywhere anybody could find you soon?
So far we've done some dates out of state, but a lot of dates are here in Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a nice schedule, which I'll also be posting on my Instagram. A nice schedule of like a lot of Florida dates right now. But we recently actually we played a couple of LA shows recently. We played an emo night in LA, which was sold out. It was great. We also opened for of course I'm gonna draw a blank on the band now. Because they're amazing. And now I'm sitting here really drawing the blank on this band that we opened for. How about that?
This is what happens when you're doing a million things in one, bro.
Too much going on. But either way, we played at the Troubadour in LA. And
Nice.
that was another sold out show. So we've been, you know, Felicity is an amazing group of guys, hardworking guys, understand the vision, and they've been in existence for a really long time. They've been in existence for 8 years or 9 years, actually. I joined in at the 8-year mark, and it's been a little over a year since then. So yeah, we're doing some out of state stuff, but a lot of stuff is here in Florida. My guess, if I had to give a prediction, you'll see some Felicity tour dates popping up sooner than later.
You're going to come to Miami?
I believe we are going to come to Miami. It's funny because I think the closest we'll be down to Miami, we're going to play Sarasota next week.
Wow.
So like I'm going this week. I'm flying to Cincinnati for a Jill Scott show, and then we'll do 2 nights in Chicago. And then I come right back to jump into some Felicity dates before then going back out to do some more Jill stuff. You know, it's a lot of back and forth, but the Felicity world is that their prediction, my prediction for my involvement there is that we'll be touring very soon. Maiden Soul, you're very likely to hear some of our music on TV sooner than later, because that's what we did it for. It's more to be a cinematic thing. And then LFJ Orchestra, I'm almost ready to pull my band out of hiatus.
Will's Pub, man, let's go.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's gonna be some nights at Will's Pub. I've been creating, and I'm almost ready to make it a thing.
We're gonna come open for you guys.
Dude, we'll open for you guys. Like, you guys have been gaining so much traction, man, and it's so dope.
It's fun, man. Well, I appreciate you. Everybody follow this man. You already know, and I appreciate you. And give me a follow at Cool Hand Gluke. I'm going to be posting up the pod next week. And good to be back. Appreciate the listeners. Appreciate the people who DM'd me and told me to bring it back. So here we are. See y'all.
Nice.
Welcome to the Glue Pod.
Hosted by Aaron Glukov.
Can we check in?